Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we'll sit down with Chris from e-commerce Chris to discuss some of the hottest topics, how automated changes and false flags are going to affect your listing, the mistakes sellers make and how to get reinstated fast, how to avoid costly mistakes, especially what works and what doesn't in 2025. Stay tuned and listen in. How has been your quarter so far when it comes down to Amazon?
Lots of new challenges, very different from first quarter last year, different case types, different appeals channels. 3 weeks ago, I got back from Seattle and I made sure to stop off in Seattle and have real conversations with real people about some of the new challenges, because I've noticed sellers are being confused by some things that Amazon's doing. I've noticed that some people at Amazon are confused by things that Amazon is doing. I've been confused by a couple of things I needed clarification on. And I also see a lot of posted information, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever, which that content doesn't really square with what I see as reality.
I always love whenever someone who's been in the industry for a while is seeing these changes. And I would love to go through each of those step by step. We mentioned AI being one of those topics that is just like it's here and Amazon is reacting to the demand. It feels like Amazon, from being super customer obsessed, now they're very competitor obsessed and they are implementing a lot of things. What do you see on the AI and what are the things that are being rolled out right now, and which are the things that sellers should be aware of when it comes down to AI in integration or implementation within even applications?
Yeah, and it splits into two categories. One is Amazon's detection AI wrongly flagging listings. People have seen that for years, but I don't think it was as driven before as it is now. They had certain automation tools, but now is like an experimental phase. So more listings are being flagged for strange reasons. So you just have to keep a very close eye on your performance notifications. Sometimes you don't even get a notification. So make sure you've got great software alert set up in case your listings change, because they love to say, oh, this is better. It'll save you time. It'll be better for buyers. Might be tinkering and experimenting and something's rolling out a little bit too early and it's being used prematurely where it impacts your detail page. And they're telling you your detail page is more clear, more efficient, easier for buyers to make a buying decision. But in your opinion, and you are the expert on your products, right? Maybe the information's worse or it's less clear, or, the content just doesn't represent your brand correctly. And then you have to spend all this time dealing with catalog teams. Some people do write an appeal and they send it to different teams that I used to work on. We can talk about that in a minute, but they are struggling to correct mistakes that Amazon's AI, I think it's going to be like that for a while.
Sometimes it's just like makes no sense. Like, for example, it was, I think like a month ago, 2 months ago, Amazon actually sent out a notification telling that you cannot use the same keywords repeatedly. If it's a cat product, you cannot use cat two times within the listing title. And then like you're thinking, all right, but what's happening to SEO? What's happening if my product is for cat? Like right now, just as I was telling you, our cat was meowing. I have the catnip spray on my desk. In those kind of scenarios, what's our best approach here? We are listening to Amazon, whatever they are suggesting us to do, but what if we implemented that and it's hurting our listing?
I mean, a lot of people have been recommending that sellers break the rules. And if they get caught, explain to Amazon that you were fixing what Amazon broke. I don't recommend that. I don't recommend risking your whole account or your ASIN with obvious listing violations. Even if you temporarily get away with something like that, it's not good for the lifetime health of the brand, of the account, or of your listing. It's much better to approach catalog teams and get them to do some of these changes or corrections for you and not to experiment. Some people have had their whole listing taken down. If you've had to escalate that previously, you fixed it previously, make that your case study and keep it handy to show it to anyone who asks. It could be your paid account manager. It could be catalog. It could be members of escalation teams. A little known fact is that a lot of escalation emails that sellers send right now are being answered or replied to with a phone call. So if a person calls you and says, we're on the leadership teams, or on the escalation teams, which that was kind of a beta or an experiment on Amazon's side, but it does happen often enough that you should be ready for such a call. Have your explanation short, have it ready, and tell them why you had to change things on a detailed page because Amazon took something out or because Amazon put something in. They should understand that there's a little bit of runaway AI going on right now. And if they don't understand it or they're ignorant of that, you should have an explanation ready quickly, briefly to explain it to them.
You gave some really good points on what one should do. And I love how you put it. When you want someone else to solve your problem, you cannot say it's your fault. Which are some of the most common mistakes that you're seeing right now that are absolutely not working and should sellers 100% avoid?
In terms of appeal, I think people are not disputing things properly when it is Amazon's fault. You can do a dispute that says this is a glitch, this is a wrong flag, but you can dispute it. The mistake sellers are making is that people are still sending in a plan of action for appeals where it isn't something that you're supposed to be admitting. And I think that because they're using AI tools to scrape information from like 2 years ago when Amazon wanted a plan of action for everything, and that's not current to now. I think I found the mystery of why sellers keep writing a POA, asking me to write a POA or asking Amazon, what kind of POA do you want? They're using logic from a couple of years ago. It's dated and it doesn't suit their situation. That's the biggest mistake I'm seeing right now. I thought they were just reading old articles, looking at old videos on YouTube. And then I realized they're probably scraping the internet for information, and all their input says is Amazon account suspended, improvement plan needed. They're using the wrong inputs into AI, and what AI spits back out is a plan of action type document, but it's dated info.
So it's also clear for our listeners. I love that you pointed that out. Plan of action, appeals, the differentiation between the two, so we are clear on what is actually the right document to send.
Disputes or appeals. There's two kinds of appeals. Pretty much 98% of the time, you're either admitting fault and they want you to appeal that a certain way, or you're disputing it. You're saying, this is incorrect info. This didn't really happen. We've been wrongfully flagged. We need our ASIN back. A dispute is not a POA, and it is not a plan of action. I've seen sellers who are disputing it. It's clear in everything they write that they're saying, this never happened. We're not guilty of this. We need to be reinstated, but it's in the format of a plan of action, which makes it sound like they're admitting something. So you can't dispute something and admit it at the same time. That's not logical. And it makes Amazon think, okay, this person didn't care enough to work on it for real, to write a real appeal. They didn't care enough about it to do an assessment. They just went for generic content. They Googled it. They found some copy and paste. And it doesn't really matter whether or not you hire a service that just hands you a pre-written template and tells you to fill in the blanks, or you use it's the same outcome. If you're putting in bad input, garbage in, garbage out, and they're not going to accept it.
So here, I think it would be super relevant for us to understand what is the difference between a POA, an appeal, and a dispute. And the reason why I'm asking is most of the time, what I believe is happening is that you're so convinced that you are right and someone wronged you. And in this case, Amazon wronged you, that you're just fighting. As you were explaining a few minutes earlier, sometimes you don't have to fight, but like you were saying with Amazon, it's just a glitch that you're testing. Beta stands for, right? It can go right or wrong, you know? So based on that, can you just briefly explain for our audience what is the difference between these three? We understand that already, but they might not.
It's the plan of action format is 3 sections. One is the root cause analysis of what went wrong, what the true causes were in terms of operational deficiencies, managerial oversights, training shortcomings. Those are root causes. They already know the causes. They're the ones that suspended the account or the listing. So section 1 is root causes. Section 2 is immediate steps taken to correct or deal with the problem. Typically, that's like we had a bad batch of inventory. It was shipped to FBA. We got a couple of complaints. We realized there was a bad batch. We used removal orders and we pulled all the inventory out. Or we sourced an item, didn't work out as well as we hoped. We deleted the listing. You know, like the short-term solutions to begin mopping up whatever mess that Amazon says you created. Section 2. The final section, the third section, is all about future prevention. All the steps you're taking to make sure that this never happens again, to make sure that you preempt any inventory problems, any bad decisions, any policy violations. So maybe having a designated compliance person on your staff who reviews policy pages consistently to make sure they haven't changed, or that their interpretation of a policy is the same as, right? Fact checking, due diligence, whatever would prevent the issue from happening again. That's a plan of action. Everyone that's been selling for years and years knows what a POA is, because at one time or another, they've had to appeal using that format to explain, yes, something went wrong. Yes, we fixed it. Yes, we have a means of preventing it in the future. Amazon got tired of reading all these plans of action. They got tired of asking for them. They got tired of reading them. They got tired of telling people to do them again. And also, sellers never really got good at the format or good at the process. Out of those three sections, some of it would be good, some of it would be bad, some of it would be detailed, some of it would be vague. They had to reject the whole thing because of one or two problems with it. So at some point, Amazon decided this is not a future that we can entertain. They still ask for a plan of action sometimes, but you as a seller should only appeal with a plan of action when they ask for it, if they specify it. If they want you to dispute it, you get all the evidence together showing that whatever action Amazon took was not substantiated, was not accurate. I do not recommend insulting them or being offensive. A lot of sellers have started getting strangely aggressive in the disputes. Disputes are factual, include dates, revenue numbers, how many orders you've had of that ASIN without having the problem they're talking about, anything that helps support your case. Make it a bulleted timeline, keep it organized, but don't use clickbait language. Don't use a lot of emotion, and don't let your frustration run away with you. Everyone knows how frustrating this is. If you spend all day on an appeal and they write back within 10 minutes and they obviously didn't read it and you get a generic answer. I mean, of course that's frustrating, but don't let it get to you to the point where your second and third and fourth one won't be read, because that happens all the time.
So far, it's clear a POA can have like different weight of how you're structuring them. Some of the times it can be simple, like as you were giving the example with the inventory. Look, this is what happened. This is how we're going to solve it. The other types could be whenever it's a dispute, if I understood correctly, there you have to be factual and let them know, look, these are the things. This is what happened beforehand. This is what's happening right now. And that should be something that on Amazon's end that they did to you versus you did to them. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, it could be technical. It could be just a wrong flag. The wrong ASINs are flagged for the wrong reasons all the time. Sometimes you have to amend or change content in terms of back-end keywords or in terms of your title on your detail page. Sometimes you do have corrections to make, but they still flagged you for the wrong thing. Right? So you're still disputing it and you're saying, look, we've made the corrections, and you prove it. We talked to catalog, we fixed the listing. We know it's fixed on the back end. We know the updates went through and it's squared away on our side and on your side. If they just send you another rejection, a generic message, then you're disputing that and coming back with, okay, we did everything we were supposed to do. We disputed it. You sent us a generic message. We're going to have to keep escalating this if you're going to keep sending us rejection language without telling us why. If you want to call account health reps and find out why they keep sending the same message, if they give you something that doesn't make sense, add it to the dispute. Keep the name, date of the time you called, the person you spoke with, take notes during the call on what they told you. And then if they gave you bad advice, include it in the next appeal. You can show Amazon how Amazon is misguiding you to the point where you're losing revenue and you're losing listings. I don't think people can afford to make these short processes take a long time anymore. It's just too competitive.
That's actually a great topic to go into. I believe if you are doing this for a long time, you will see clearly whatever you do, anyone else can learn how to do it in their beginner way. What people are paying us for, honestly, it's our expertise of troubleshooting, seeing exactly what is wrong and fixing that quickly. Let's talk about that some more.
Some people are using shortcuts and they're misguided, or they're not even doing the shortcut right. Some people are just trying to do a lot of this stuff themselves. They don't want to necessarily bring in professionals for everything. Think of it like, I don't know how much driving you've done on ice or in snowstorms. If you are driving and you start to skid, there's a right way to handle the skid and a wrong way to handle the skid. At least initially, you have to go with the skid and you can't just slam on the brakes. What happens when people slam on the brakes is you start to spin. Spinning, it may take longer. You might hit something, you lose control of the vehicle. I don't know how many of you have hung out in New England like I have in the winter or in the Colorado Rockies. If you do the wrong thing early in the process, you start to skid and you do the equivalent of jamming on the brakes or accelerating the wrong way, you start to spin. I see brands who lose a listing and should have had the listing back in 48 hours. And instead it's 2 weeks by the time they call me. And so they lost 10 or 12 extra days. I look at their appeals and they're guessing or experimenting, or they're like spending their free time looking on Reddit, looking on YouTube. And it's not so much about Reddit or YouTube. It's the quality of the advice they're listening to. And they're trying to adapt their appeal to some unrelated content. The problem, and I understand why they're doing it, is with Amazon, if you don't send specific customized content for the specific issue and reason, like if you write an appeal that deals with certain types of buyer complaints about your product, let's say expired item complaint, but it's really item defects that have nothing to do with expired, and you're mixing and matching the language. First of all, they don't take you seriously because they think you're copying and pasting everything. Secondly, you haven't addressed the issue, so they reject it. And then thirdly, you're probably not going to address the issue the next time either because you're stuck in that spin. The longer it goes, the less likely you are to pull out of it, right? So you have to take a breather. I understand it's tempting to panic. It's tempting to believe if you're taking action that you're doing something, and doing something feels good. I understand that if you feel like you're doing nothing versus doing something, you feel like you're not doing enough. But that doesn't address the nuances of the appeals process. I also see people doing escalation emails that they send to senior management or even executives at Amazon. You can tell it's been written by AI or something like ChatGPT. I can tell when people email me and they write it with AI. If I can tell, somebody at Amazon can tell because they're getting 10 of those every afternoon or every day or 15. So it's like you're only hurting yourself when you do stuff like that.
Yeah. Now here, we don't have anything against ChatGPT. In my case, I absolutely love ChatGPT. And most of my emails still come through ChatGPT because sometimes I like all over the place and I want it to be logic and concise as possible. So I am going to use ChatGPT. The point you're making is that there's this same tone of voice, this, I hope this email finds you well, all kinds of like those things that you are just like cringing. So I do definitely see your point on, hey, this is not even personalized. This is nothing that I should be looking into. So I like that you put it that while ChatGPT can be amazing, sometimes just like you're still the master of it, not it should be the master of you.
It's not like a doctor where you say, I have no medical training. There's nothing I can do. I'm going to go to the ChatGPT doctor, tell them the problem, and they're going to come back with the full answer. And then I just run with the full answer. That's not what it is. Your inputs matter. If you don't have quality input, then the outcome will not be good.
Last question. What do you think should be the takeaway for our listeners?
Well, one thing is I would say decide very early on if you need help with something. Don't try 4 things, fail 4 times, and then decide you need help. If you have a problem and you have fixed it in the past and it doesn't seem more complicated than the previous problem, then yes, attempt to fix it. If you are starting to spin or spiral after 1 or 2 appeals, do not keep experimenting. We see people hire companies that just spend a lot on ads and they don't really vet their service providers. People are agency hopping, just like they hop around for services that say they do what we do. The problem is when you're appealing stuff, you're losing money every day. You could be digging a deeper hole every time you appeal, and Amazon tunes you out. And they stop reading what you're sending in, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have an unlimited numbers of times to get it right. And also, if it takes you 3 months versus 3 weeks, that's a lot of money that you're losing. So think in advance how much money you're losing by handling things in an amateur way or in a guesswork way. I don't think you have that margin for error anymore. I think now, just because your competitors can knock you off so easily within days, not weeks. Fees are going up. God only knows what tariffs will be. There's always curveballs Amazon's throwing at you. There's so many challenges now. You can't really afford to bungle the appeals process and make bad decisions. If you know that, decide early on, do I have the capability to fix this myself? Or should I make an assessment, decide I'm in over my head and I need someone else to do it? It doesn't have to be me, but it has to be somebody who's got experience and they're competent and they have more than a sales pitch, or spend money on getting a bunch of 5-star reviews from people that didn't even use their service. It's up to you to vet your service provider.
This was a pleasure as always. How can people find you, say hello, find out more about your services?
I mean, ecommerchris.com is the site. You can always email us at support@ecommerchris.com if you want us to review something. It always helps to put Noemi's name in the subject line, so I know you heard my voice on her podcast, because I'm guessing I'll be back on the podcast, and Noemi's going to be on our podcast as well. It's good to stay in the knowledge loop, and I recommend that people not tune out what's going on with Amazon or in the seller community. You have to stay informed. I don't think anyone can afford otherwise.
And your podcast name?
Seller Performance Solutions is our podcast, and we're going to have you on soon, probably in the next 30 days, right?
And also, guys, listen to their podcast as well. This is actually how we went on today's recording. They were talking about a super important topic about AI. How is this going to disrupt like everything what is going on, but not in a good way necessarily, but like, which are the things that we should be super aware of. So this is also how Chris ended on our podcast today. Yeah. Thanks so much, Chris, once again for sharing all the knowledge, and looking forward to hear back from you for the next episode.
See you soon.
Take care.
Bye.